As South Africa actively pursues a transition to renewable energy, including a 19 gigawatt of renewable energy capacity by 2030, there are concerns about whether these goals are indeed achievable. Policies, including the Renewable Energy Independent Power Producers Procurement Programme, are being implemented in an effort to accelerate the shift. But Head of Strategic Risk at Riskonet Africa, Volker von Widdern, has warned the country's energy transition timeline is under immense pressure and project execution delays are already triggering systemic risk across energy security, fiscal credibility and investor confidence. Well, he joins us now to discuss that. Welcome to Business on Point. Now, you've said the country risks a second power crisis within the current decade. Please explain why you said this.
The context of this is that we're already relatively close to the energy production margins. That's at about 30,000 megawatts or gigawatts that we have the measurement. If mining increases or if there's a spike in winter, we push those margins quite closely. Of course, we have the gas-fired stations that can help out. But the risk of unforeseen repairs and delays always compromises, and we do have evidence of slight sessions of load shedding still now. If one then adds to that there's a declining likelihood of generation through the coal-fired fleet and the current planned rollout of transmission increased capacity, you then get the gap. So what we need is to go from a minimum, we have installed capacity of 40 gigawatts, we need to get to 50 and 60. The effective generation is at about 30,000 with some help from gas and so forth. But we need to get to 35 and 40 and replace the exiting coal fleet. All of this puts pressure on the transmission lines. So while it's good to hear that there's 400 billion being planned on transmission lines, one actually has to relate this to the actual amount of power needed in the economy and what transmission capacity is needed new to do this. And then one sees that the rate of likely increase in transmission capacity isn't meeting the very much higher level of production capacity. So I don't think we've got a problem with production, we've got a problem with transmission relative to the current plans. And that's what will lead to a likely second constraint in power availability.
How can South Africa accelerate the deployment of renewable energy projects under the REIPPPP to meet its energy security needs?
Well, what we have now, I think, is a well-developed REIPP program. The issue is to get that power into the industrial base or the right places of South Africa. And I think new models should be considered to highly accelerate transmission capacity through the country. And acknowledging that private and other interests are there and have been welcomed. The scale of this, though, is really the point. If we don't achieve the scale quickly, and that is we get these deployed within the next 3 to 5 years and then built, because it takes time to do all of this, that's when we're going to hit real power constraints from 2030 to 35. So if one imagines a series of parallel projects running power lines, whether they're on above, as we know, or even alongside new models to transmit power, different kinds of billing techniques. We have the power transmission company, but I think the level of acceleration and deployment is the issue there. So people are queuing up behind various dependencies rather than saying we've got to deploy a gigawatt or more of transmission capacity per annum. How do we meet these goals and meet them now? And I think we're in more of a process logic rather than a targeted outcome plan.
What are the key challenges hindering the country's grid infrastructure, particularly the NTCSA's 14,000 kilometre transmission line targets?
Well, that's the point. So we're aiming at 14,000, but we're delivering a couple of hundred under the current model. So under that, so you'd say, well, okay, what are all the constraints? And some of the constraints relate hugely to funding, but actually capital's not such a big constraint. If you then visualize, and I'm being very simplified here, but if you visualized 5 or 10 new toll roads, but the toll roads happen to relate to electricity, and then you gave concessions to these for, say, the usual 20, 25 years, and saying, go and do the deal for land, for transmission, there's more than enough power that can be generated over the period. The issue is flexible and scalable and agile models to transmit the power and allow new capital to come into the market. And that is what will take us from a couple of 100 kilometers to thousands of kilometers of transmission per annum, which will then meet the need.
And how about delays in regulatory processes and policy uncertainty? How do they impact the private sector investment in South Africa's energy transition?
Well, so let's say it took any number, 1 or 3 years to get your environmental approvals, or to get the agreements done with perhaps landowners, whether they're farmers or commercials or otherwise. Perhaps an alternative is a template that says, we're going to do transmission on this basis. If we can't do it above ground, we'll do it underground or next to or something. If we need to rent property, we'll rent it rather than expropriate it. So all these models can be agreed as a template, and you give that template to the new capital providers and saying, this is how we're going to do it. We're really, not that non-confident that people will get an extra return on their land. And if we need to adjust the mobilization or deployment of the transmission networks, we can do so. Right now, we have a huge cable that goes down alongside the N3, which carries our fiber optic networks. So there are many models to carry cables. We just got to figure out how to do that, but do this in parallel, multiple projects at the same time to achieve those capacity needs.
Thank you very much. That was Volker von Widdern, Head of Strategic Risk at Riskonet Africa.